The sun hung lazily in the sky over Umole, its golden rays struggling to pierce through the ominous haze that had settled over the village. Once the village bustled with life, children running between mud huts, women laughing at the stream, and farmers tilling their fertile lands. But now, Umole felt like a shadow of itself. The fields were barren, the laughter muted, and a deep unease wrapped itself around every household. "Have you heard, Nkem?" whispered a middle aged woman at the marketplace, her voice trembling. "They found Wokoji's youngest son dead this morning." Nkem gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Another one? That's the third death this week. It is truly the curse." "It must be," replied the first woman, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "The signs are all there. The curse has returned, just as the elders feared." The curse? A whispered legend that most of the younger generation has dismissed as an old wives' tale. But now, with the mysterious death and the fields producing nothing but withered stalks, the villagers could no longer deny its presence. In the village square, a crowd has gathered around the elders, who sat in a solemn circle. Nze Chukwuemeka, the eldest and most respected of them, leaned heavily on his carved staff, his face etched with lines of wisdom and worry. "What do we do now, Nze?" asked Obina, a young farmer whose desperation was evident in his cracked voice. "Our crops are dying. Our children are dying. How do we stop this madness?" Nze Chukwuemeka sighed deeply. "The curse of the shrine is no simple matter, Obina. It was sealed generation ago, but something has disturbed its rest. The spirit demands retribution." Chief Okoro, the wealthiest man in Umole, stepped forward. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd as he spoke, his voice smooth but commanding. "Retribution, you say? But whose fault is it that the curse has returned? Someone must have angered the gods." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, each silently wondering if they were to blame. Later that evening, in the quiet of their home, Mama Nkechi and her daughter, Adora, sat by the dim light of an oil lamp. Adora was a striking young woman with soft features and quiet strength that radiated from her every movement. Her mother, a widow for many years, had raised her with unwavering devotion. "Mama," Adora began hesitantly, "do you think the curse is real?" Mama Nkechi looked up sharply. "Adora, such talk is dangerous. The villagers are scared. Fear makes people say and do things they would not do normally." But the dirt Adora trailed off her brow frowned. Mama Nkechi reached for her daughter's hand. "Listen to me, my child. Whatever is happening in this village, you must stay strong. We have our faith to guide us." As the days passed, the whispers in the village grew louder, and one name began to surface more than others: Adora. "She's always been strange," said the old man at the stream, her voice lower but insistent. "So quiet, so devout. If anyone is a virgin of the prophecy, it must be her." Another man nodded. "And haven't you noticed, nothing ever happens to that her family. Their crops haven't failed like ours." The rumor soon reached Chief Okoro, who saw an opportunity to strengthen his influence. One evening, he gathered a group of men at his compound. "We cannot let this curse destroy us," he declared, pacing before the flickering firelight. "The prophecy speaks of the virgin's blood. If Adora is truly the one, we must act before it's too late." "But how do we know for sure?" asked one of them, his voice uncertain. Chief Okoro replied coldly, "We will find out. Leave that to me." Meanwhile, Adora was plagued by a restless night. Each time she closed her eyes, she found herself standing in the heart of the village, facing the old shrine. A dark figure loomed around her, its voice a low, resonant whisper. "Come to me," it called. "Your blood will set us free." Adora woke up with a start, her heart racing. She glanced around her dimly lit room, the shadows playing tricks on her mind. "Mama," she whispered into the darkness, her voice trembling, "something is wrong." The next morning, Mama Nkechi confronted the elders. "Why are you people spreading lies about my daughter? she demanded, her voice firm despite her fear. Adora is a good girl. She has done nothing to deserve this. Nze Chukwemeka regarded her solemnly. Mama Nkechi, you must understand, the villagers are desperate. When fear takes hold, reason flees. But Adora is innocent, she insisted. Chifokoro stepped forward, his expression calm but unyielding. If your daughter has nothing to hide, then she will not fear the truth. Let her come to the shrine and prove she is not the one. Mama Nkechi's hand clenched into the fist. You will not harm my child, she said, through gritted teeth. As the villagers spread through its chaos, into chaos, Adora found herself increasingly isolated. Friends avoided her, neighbors whispered behind her back, and even the children no longer played near her home. One evening, as she fetched water from the stream, a group of young women approached her. Adora, one of them said, her tone both curious and accusatory. Do you dream of the shrine? Do you see the spirit? Adora froze, the bucket slipping from her hand. What are you talking about? We know, another girl said, her eyes narrowing. The curse is calling, you cannot run from it. By the time Adora returned home, she was shaking. Mama, she said, her voice breaking. They think I am the cause of all this. Mama Nkechi pulled her into a tight embrace. Let them talk, my child. God will protect us. But as night fell and the haunting dreams returned, Adora couldn't shake the feeling that the dark figure's voice was growing stronger. Come to me, it whispered again, more insistent this time. And in her heart, Adora knew the curse was far from over, but she never knew that her blood would have to be the one that would save the village. With fear and tension, the villagers had gathered at the square again. Their murmur was a mix of mixture and confusion. Chief Okoro stood tall in the center, his voice booming as he addressed the crowd. The gods demand justice, he declared, his hand raised for emphasis. For too long, we have ignored their warnings. We must appease them or the curse will consume all of us. But how do we know this is true? Came a voice from the crowd. It was Chiamaka, a bold woman known for questioning authority. What proof do you have that the gods want blood? Chief Okoro's sharp eyes locked into hers. Chiamaka, will you risk the lives of your children to doubt the gods? The prophecy is clear. The virgin's blood is the only way to end this curse. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. In the king's palace, Eze-Buka sat on his throne, his head heavy with worry. The responsibility of his people weighed on him like a milestone. Nze Chukwemeka was seated before him, his carved staff resting across his knees. Nze, do you believe this talk of blood sacrifice? The king asked, his voice low. Nze Chukwemeka shook his head slowly. I believe in the gods, Eze, but I am also believing in wisdom. This part Chief Okoro pushes towards us smells of deceit. Ebuka sighed, and yet the people grow restless. I must find a way to calm them before they act on their fear. Then act quickly, Eze, Nze Chukwemeka said gravely. Fear is the sharpest weapon in the hands of a cunning man. That evening, Obina found Adora near the stream. The soft growling of the water was a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the village. Adora, he said urgently, you must leave. Go to my uncle's farm in the next village. You will be safe there. Adora turned to him, her fear faced with fear. Obina, I can't run. If the curse is calling me, then I must face it. Face it, he exclaimed, his frustration clear. Do you even hear yourself? Chief Okoro is twisting the prophecy for his own gain. This isn't about the gods, it's about power. Adora looked away, her voice soft. Maybe it's both. Meanwhile, in his compound, Chief Okoro was meeting with a group of his closest allies. His tone was triumphant as he spoke. The people trust me now, he said. Soon, they will demand the ritual themselves. And once it's done, what do you think they will look for to give the next leadership? One of the men frowned, but what if the king interferes? Chief Okoro smirked. The king is weak, torn between tradition and these foreign ideas of mercy and progress. He won't act until it's too late. The men laughed, their voices echoing into the night. In the dead of night, Nze Chukwemeka sat in his hut, poring over ancient scrolls and text. His fingers trembled as he unrolled a brittle parchment, its edges darkened by age. As he read the faded words, his eyes widened in shock. The virgin's blood, he murmured, his voice barely audible. It's not about death, it's about forgiveness, a sacrifice of anger and hatred, not flesh. Realization dawned upon him. He grabbed the staff and hurried out into the night, the chill air biting at his skin. At the same time, Adora was in her room, staring at the darkened ceiling. The dreams had returned, more vivid than ever. This time, the dark figure didn't call to her. It stood before her, silent and imposing. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, tears streaming down her eyes. The figure raised a hand, pointing towards the shrine. The next morning, Obina sought out Nze Chukwemeka. "Nze," he said, out of breath, "Adora won't leave. She's determined to stay." Nze Chukwemeka nodded, his expression serious. "Then we must protect her. I've discovered the truth about the prophecy." Chifokora has twisted his meaning to suit his ambitions. "What do you mean?" Obina asked, leaning closer. "The virgin's blood does not mean sacrifice." Nze Chukwemeka explained. "It means an act of healing. Adora's role is to forgive, to mend the reed between the people and the gods." Obina frowned, "But how do we make the villagers understand this?" They were ready to follow Okoro to the shrine. And it was the next day that they had programmed Adora to be sacrificed to the gods. But they didn't know that that wasn't the god's desire. And if she gets killed, it will bring sudden death to the land. The night air was thick with tension. As the villagers gathered at the shrine, shadows danced across the faces of the crowd, their torchlight flickering against the shrine's ancient carvings. Adora stood in the center, her white gown glowing faintly in the firelight. Her face was calm, but her heart pounded with fear. Chief Okoro stood before her, the ceremonial knife in his hand. His voice boomed as he addressed the villagers. "Tonight we end this course," he declared, raising the knife high. "The gods demand blood, and we shall not fail them." The villagers murmured in uneasy agreement. Some averted their eyes, unable to bear the sight of what was about to happen. Others, swayed by fear and superstition, watched intensely. Mama Nkechi stood at the edge of the crowd, her face clinched tightly. "This is wrong," she cried out. "My daughter is innocent." Chief Okoro turned to her, his expression cold. "Silence, woman, the gods have spoken." "Have they?" came a new voice, strong and clear. The crowd parted as Obina and Nze Chukwemeka stepped forward. Nze held the ancient staff aloft, its edges glowing faintly into the torchlight. "This staff contains the truth of the prophecies," they announced. "The gods do not demand death, they demand forgiveness." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chief Okoro's face darkened with anger. "Lies! These are lies meant to confuse you all." Obina stepped forward, his voice firm. "No, Chief Okoro, you are the liar. You twisted the prophets for your own gain, using fear to control the people." Several villagers began to murmur, their faith in Chief Okoro wavering. "Read it," someone called out. Nze unrolled the scroll and read aloud, his voice steady despite the tension. "The virgin's blood is not for death, but for healing. A sacrifice not of life, but of anger and division. Only through forgiveness can the curse be lifted." The villagers listened in stunned silence. Chief Okoro sneered, "Do you really think the gods will accept words instead of blood? Look around you, the curse still lingers." At that moment, a chilling wind swept through the shrine. The torches flickered, and the air grew heavy with an unnatural presence. A dark figure from Adora's dream began to materialize before the crowd. It was a towering body, its eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. A collective gasp rose from the villagers as they stepped back in fear. "The spirit!" someone whispered. Adora stood frozen as the figure turned to her, its voice deep and resonant. "We have come. Child of light, will you break the chains or let them bind forever?" Adora's voice trembled as she spoke. "What do you want from me?" The figure tones softened. "Redemption, peace. The curse was born from hatred and betrayal. Only love and forgiveness can break it." The villagers looked on in awe and terror as Adora stepped closer to the figure. Her voice was steady now. "I forgive you," she said, her eyes locking with his glowing gaze. The figure seemed to flutter, its form flickering. Then offer the blood of forgiveness, and the curse will end. Chifoko, realizing his power was slipping away, lunged forward with the knife. No, the gods demanded. Obina intercepted him, tackling him on the ground. The knife clattered away as the two men struggled. Enough! Ezebuka's voice rang out as he arrived with his guards. This madness ends now. The guard restrained Chief Okoro, who screamed and trashed, "You all fools! The curse will never end without blood." Ignoring him, Adora knelt before the shrine. She took the ceremonial knife, her hand trembling. "If blood is needed, let it be mine, not in the dead, but in healing." With a swift motion, she drew the blade across her palm. The blood glistened in the firelight as she pressed her hand to the shrine. A sudden burst of light erupted from the shrine, enveloping the entire area. The villagers shielded their eyes, and a deep resonant hum filled the air. When the light faded, the figure was gone. The air felt lighter, and the once barren trees around the shrine were now lush with green leaves. The villagers stared in awe as the cursed hold over Umole was broken. Chief Okoro was dragged before the king, his face pale with fear. "Eze," Nze Chukwuemeka said, "this man manipulated us all. He nearly destroyed this village with his greed and lies." Ezebuka nodded solemnly. "Chief Okoro, you are hereby exiled from Umole. May you find redemption elsewhere, for you will find no home here." As the guard led Chief Okoro away, the villagers began to despair, their spirit lighter than they had been in months. Back at home, Adora sat with Obina and Mama Nkechi. Her palm was bandaged, but her heart felt at peace. "You were incredible tonight," Obina said, his voice filled with admiration. Adora smiled faintly. "I only did what I had to do." Mama Nkechi placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You've brought honor to our family, Adora. The village will never forget what you have done." In the days that followed, peace returned to Umole. The fields began to flourish again, and the villagers worked together to rebuild what had been lost. This is the end of this story. I hope you did enjoy it. If this is your first time